Welcome, learner. Today we are exploring, well, it feels like a pretty fundamental shift in how science might get done. We're talking about the idea of an autonomous AI scientist. Our source material is focused squarely on one specific example, Edison Scientific's Cosmos AI. And our goal here is to really understand the reports to figure out how this system goes from just being, a very smart tool.
Like an advanced lab assistant, maybe?
Exactly, to something more like a genuine colleague, a colleague that can apparently pack months of expert-level research work into a single day.
And we really need to anchor that claim right from the start, because it does sound a bit like science fiction, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah, this isn't just about automating repetitive tasks. The way the sources describe it, it's more like hiring a mind, one that can read thousands of research papers, write its own code, debug that code, analyze complex data, argue with its own conclusions, and then deliver a fully cited report. The core promise, and they have independent valuations backing this up, is that a full run compresses about 6 months of human expert work into, a single day.
6 months.
Yeah.
Condensed into 24 hours. That kind of acceleration is almost hard to properly imagine. Okay, let's try and unpack this. What's the fundamental jump? What makes an AI scientist different from just, very sophisticated software, allowing it to hit that speed but also maintain the necessary rigor?
I think the crucial difference, the real leap, is moving beyond simply reacting to data or instructions towards actual planning.
Okay.
See, a normal script just does what you tell it with the data you provide. An AI scientist, like Cosmos is described, sets and pursues long-term research goals. And to do that, to chase a big goal over time, it can't just wait for a human prompt every 5 minutes.
Right, it needs some internal drive.
Exactly. It has to build and constantly revise its own internal picture of the research landscape. Edison Scientific calls this its structured world model.
So it's about internalizing the knowledge it gathers.
Yeah.
And using that synthesized understanding to decide its own next steps instead of just waiting for the next instruction.
Precisely. That structured world model is really the operational core. You can think of it like a single source of truth for the whole project. I mean, any research project has tons of subtasks, right? Literature review, cleaning data, building models, generating hypotheses.
Yep. Dozens, maybe hundreds sometimes.
And if those tasks aren't coordinated, the whole thing just falls apart. This world model acts to synchronize the outputs from all the different specialized bits, the literature agent, the analysis agent, the visualization part. It keeps the entire research program coherent, even when hundreds of these tasks are running at the same time.
Ah, okay. So that cohesion is what lets it handle really complex problems. But look, the proof's in the pudding, as they say. If you're seriously thinking of this system as a scientist, what are the actual observable things it does? Is there like a checklist that proves it's acting like an independent investigator?
Yeah, the source material lays out 4 key behaviors. These are sort of the non-negotiables that push it into that scientist category. First, it absolutely must plan its research agenda. It can't just react to whatever data comes in last.
Okay, proactive planning. Got it.
Second, it has to cite evidence for every single claim it makes. Everything needs to be traceable back to a source, whether that's a paper or a piece of analysis it ran, full transparency.
That's critical for trust. What's third?
Third is intellectual flexibility. It needs to be able to generalize, to take a concept or a method from one field, say cancer research, and see if it applies to a problem in a totally different area, like material science.
Right, cross-pollination of ideas.
Yeah.
And the fourth one?
And the fourth is maybe the most important for actual discovery.
Yeah.
It has to surface novel hypotheses. It can't just be a fancy summarization engine.
It has to propose genuinely new, testable ideas. Things a human might have missed.
Exactly. And it's that whole disciplined workflow plan, search, analyze, update that internal world model, test again that makes the final output feel, reflective and decisive, like a sharp colleague working methodically.
Okay, that makes sense conceptually. Now let's get into the engine room, so to speak. Because ambition is one thing, but performance needs hard numbers. We need to benchmark that 6-month claim. How impressive are the actual performance metrics?
Well, they're pretty staggering, honestly, and they speak directly to that feeling of information overload we all face in science today. Just look at the metrics for a single typical Cosmos run, maybe 8 to 12 hours long. For breadth, it reads and incorporates something like 1,500 full scientific papers.
1,500 papers
Yeah.
in one run.
Yeah. And for depth, it executes around 42,000 lines of code per run. That's a sheer volume of analysis it brings to bear in that short time.
Whoa, okay, hold on. 42,000 lines of code executed. Is that like high-quality targeted analysis, or is it just the AI throwing statistical spaghetti at the wall hoping something sticks?
That's a fair question. And that's where the structured world model and that cite evidence rule becomes so important. The code isn't random. It's written, executed, and then validated against the rules and knowledge stored in that world model. That's how they measure the efficiency claim. The sources confirm that the output from a longer, say, 20-cycle run is reliably equivalent to about 6 months of focused expert human time. But what's really important for you, the user, is the scaling. The number of useful, valuable findings tends to grow almost linearly with the number of runtime cycles you invest. So run it longer, you tend to get proportionally more insights. It's somewhat predictable.
Okay, predictability is good, but now we have to hit the elephant in the data room. Accuracy. You can generate findings incredibly fast, but if they're wrong, well, the whole thing is worse than useless. The number cited is 79.4% for independent statement accuracy. I have to push back here, 79.4%. Honestly, that sounds kind of terrifying. Doesn't that mean roughly 1 in 5 statements could be flawed? How do we reconcile that risk with a claim of expert-level work?
That is absolutely the critical point to grasp. And it's exactly why this is framed as an augmentative colleague, not a replacement for the human scientist. Look, 79.4% is actually pretty strong when you consider the sheer scale reading 1,500 papers, many potentially contradictory, running tens of thousands of lines of code across different data types.
Okay, context matters.
Right. But yes, it absolutely leaves room for error. It necessitates human oversight and validation. The accuracy is high enough to generate potentially breakthrough leads, to massively narrow down the possibilities, but it is not high enough to just take its output as gospel and publish it. It doesn't eliminate the need for scientific rigor. It shifts where you apply that rigor. You move from spending months doing the manual searching and basic analysis to spending your time critically evaluating the AI's most surprising or pivotal claims.
Right. So the human researcher's job changes. We become less data collector, more hypothesis scrutinizer and validator.
Precisely. And like any good scientist, human or AI, it needs to prove its worth, not just by reproducing things we already know, but by genuinely discovering something new.
So has it done that? Has Cosmos actually moved beyond just confirming existing knowledge and into generating novel findings? Can you give us some concrete examples?
Yes, the sources highlight a few. Take neuroprotection, for instance. They fed Cosmos a bunch of complex whole-brain metabolomics data from mice subjected to hypothermia cooling.
Okay, we know cooling can protect the brain after injury, but the why is fuzzy.
Exactly. The mechanism was murky. Cosmos analyzed all that metabolic data and specifically spotlighted an energy-saving shift towards something called nucleotide salvage. Basically, the cells started recycling their components much more heavily instead of building new ones from scratch, which takes more energy. And then, crucially, it proposed follow-up analyses that helped rule out the more conventional de novo synthesis pathway as the main driver. It pointed towards a specific, less obvious mechanism.
Okay, that's a deep mechanistic insight connecting the cooling effect to specific metabolic choices by the cells. What about something messier, like material science, where data can be noisy?
Good example. In perovskite performance, these are materials used in next-gen solar cells, but they're notoriously tricky to make consistently. Cosmos sifted through thousands of fabrication logs and performance results. It identified a factor that humans had largely overlooked, the humidity level during a specific step called thermal annealing. It flagged this as a decisive filter for whether a batch would succeed or fail.
Something subtle in the process control.
Exactly. And it went further, discovering a novel linear relationship between the partial pressure of a specific solvent used and the resulting short-circuit current density, a key performance metric. That finding apparently helped solve a major manufacturing consistency problem that had stumped researchers.
Wow. So the AI found the hidden variable by cross-referencing masses of log data and performance data at a scale humans just weren't doing.
That's so incredibly useful.
And a third example you mentioned on disease timing?
Right, Alzheimer's timing. Here, the system was given neuron-level proteomics data protein measurements ordered along a kind of disease progression timeline, what scientists call pseudotime. Instead of just applying standard statistical methods, which might smooth over important changes, Cosmos actually proposed and used a new, relatively simple technique called segmented regression.
Segmented regression.
Yeah, basically a way to find sharp breakpoints and trends. It used this to pinpoint the exact stage in the disease progression where the decline of the extracellular matrix, the stuff surrounding brain cells, suddenly speeds up. What's cool here is that it didn't just find a result, it effectively invented a useful, generalizable method for analyzing this kind of time course data in biology.
That is genuinely impressive, inventing a methodology.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's peek under the hood again. How does it actually manage this whole discovery process? Can you walk us through the main steps of a typical Cosmos run?
Sure, it's laid out as a 5-step cycle, essentially. Step 1 is pretty straightforward. Define the objective. You, the human researcher, provide the source data and set the high-level goal, like identify protective mechanisms against type 2 diabetes using this genomic and clinical data.
Okay, set the direction.
Step 2 is launch parallel agents. Once it has the goal, it immediately spins up multiple specialized software agents that work in parallel. You might have one digging through literature for potential mechanisms, while another is running complex statistical fits on your data set all at the same time.
Divide and conquer.
Step 3 is the core loop, really. Update the world model. Every piece of information, a paper summary, a statistical result, even a failed hypothesis gets fed back into that central structured world model. The system constantly reasons over this evolving graph of evidence. This prevents it from chasing down dead ends or repeating work that's already been covered. It's that sustained, coherent attention over time that humans, frankly, struggle with over a 6-month project.
Right, keeping it all straight in your head.
Step 4 is hypothesize and test. Based on the current world model, the system generates new hypotheses and then writes and executes the code needed to test them. And critically, if a particular analysis pipeline fails, maybe a statistical assumption is violated or the data isn't quite right, it doesn't just crash, it adapts. It tries an alternative approach. It shows this kind of computational persistence.
That adaptability is key. And step 5.
Step 5 is deliver a cited report. At the end of the run or at defined checkpoints, it produces a full report. And crucially, every claim, every figure, every conclusion is explicitly linked back to either the primary literature citation it came from or the specific code notebook that generated the result.
So that's the transparency piece. You can directly check its work.
Exactly. That's how you manage that 20% error rate. You go straight to the source for anything surprising or critical.
Okay, let's switch gears to practicality. For the researcher listening, how do you actually get access to this, and what's the competitive landscape look like?
So Cosmos is publicly available from Edison Scientific. They use a credit system. The sources mention a full comprehensive run costs about 200 credits.
Oh, yeah?
And they seem keen on academic adoption. They offer quite generous starter credits for users with .edu email addresses, apparently. In terms of competition, well, it's an emerging space. Google has talked about their own AI co-scientist projects, often internally focused. There are also more specialized AI firms like Sakana AI that might have agents focused on specific tasks, like writing methods sections for machine learning papers.
So where does Cosmos fit in? What makes it different?
I'd say 2 things primarily stand out from the source material. That structured world model is key for orchestrating these complex, long-running, multifaceted research tasks. And second, it's public accessibility right now. You could, in theory, integrate this into your lab's workflow relatively quickly.
Okay, so if I'm a researcher, maybe I've got some credits. What are the killer apps? When should I really think about using a tool like this? Where's the highest leverage?
Definitely for cross-domain synthesis. If your project absolutely requires integrating insights from, say, genomics with medical imaging and clinical patient outcomes, keeping all those threads coherent is incredibly hard for human teams. The world model is designed for exactly that.
Makes sense. What else?
Also, exploratory data analysis at scale. Maybe you have a new data set and 10 plausible but complex modeling approaches you want to try. Running all those, debugging them, comparing them, that could take an analyst days or weeks. The system can execute that kind of parallel exploration much, much faster, just to see what sticks.
Smoke testing hypotheses quickly.
Exactly. And related to that Alzheimer's example, method invention, if you have a hunch that a simpler, maybe overlooked statistical approach might work better for your specific data type, you can task the AI with proposing and testing those novel analytical methods. And finally, a big one, literature triage. If you're jumping into a new research field, and there are, say, 5,000 relevant papers, forget spending months reading abstracts. The AI scientist can ingest, read, cluster, and map that entire knowledge landscape in an afternoon. It gives you a comprehensive overview and identifies the key papers and debates almost instantly.
That alone sounds incredibly valuable for getting up to speed. Okay, but we have to close the loop on the risks. We talked about the 79.4% accuracy.
Yeah.
What does that look like in practice? What are the real consequences when it gets something wrong?
It means the human must remain the final checkpoint and maintain accountability. The system will make errors. Sometimes they might be subtle flaws in reasoning based on conflicting papers. Other times they can be surprisingly trivial mistakes with big downstream consequences. The sources give an example related to a gene called SOD2. The system apparently misannotated a binding site for a microRNA because it relied on one automated database prediction instead of cross-referencing with the standard, manually curated consensus databases. A small error, but potentially leading to a completely wrong biological conclusion if unchecked.
So the rule is, if the AI tells you something surprising or really important, you treat it like a preliminary result from the lab.
Exactly like that. Check the notebook, check the code, check the primary sources it's cited. Verify.
And what about just operational headaches? Running 42,000 lines of code sounds like it could just break easily.
It absolutely can. The sources mention that pipelines can fail for really basic reasons. A mismatch in column names between two data sets, maybe a weirdly formatted p-value in an external file it pulls in. Now, Cosmos apparently tries to adapt and find workarounds, which is good flexibility, but it still underscores the need for research teams to be really rigorous about standardizing their input data, their naming conventions, using data validation checks, what they call guardrails.
Yeah, you don't want your 6-month equivalent AI run to crash 18 cycles in because someone misspelled a column header.
Precisely. Huge waste of time and credits.
So it really comes back to this idea of augmentation, not replacement. The human sets the crucial objectives, brings the deep domain expertise to judge if a finding is mechanistically plausible, and ultimately designs the definitive experiments to truly validate a discovery.
That's right. The AI provides immense leverage, incredible acceleration, but the rigor still ultimately relies on the human oversight, using the transparency the system provides, that pointer back to the source data or code.
So, stepping back, looking at the bigger picture, what does Cosmos AI really represent?
I think the sources position it not just as an interesting tool or a curiosity, but as a piece of essential research infrastructure. It marks a point where compute power and sophisticated algorithms are finally catching up to the sheer volume of data in science, enabling a fundamentally new, much faster way of doing research.
So what does this mean for you, the listener, in your daily work? The source material actually urges researchers to set a target aim for generating at least one reproducible AI scientist report relevant to your work each quarter. The big research questions are still yours to define and answer. But the potential for acceleration, well, it seems demonstrably real now.
And the really meaningful leap here, maybe the provocative thought to leave you with, isn't about creating some kind of mystical general intelligence. It's about sustained, focused, analytical attention maintained over thousands of cycles, guided by a coherent world model. The frontier is definitely shifting. So what happens next? What happens when systems like this get coupled even more tightly to the lab bench? Imagine closed-loop workflows where the AI designs follow-up experiments based on its analysis in the afternoon.
And automated robotic systems execute those experiments overnight.
Exactly. That iterative cycle of AI-driven hypothesis, automated experiment, and data feeding back into the AI, that seems like the immediate path towards generating durable scientific knowledge much, much faster than ever before.